want to introduce what I found as a new technique. This is actually Buddhanusati meditation. It's about reflecting on the virtues of the Samma Sambuddha. So I will guide you on it. And it was a slightly different way that I experienced recently by Venerable Bhadde Gama Vanshalankara Swamin Wahanse when he came to teach at our Dhamma school. So may I request you all to sit comfortably and gently close your eyes. So we are going to reflect on the virtues of the Samma Sambuddha. Now imagine that we are present in a time where the Buddha is also present. And we have had the good fortune to be granted a private audience with the Samma Sambuddha. Now imagine that you are sitting in front of the Buddha, and the Buddha is seated as well. And the Buddha is meditating, and you have been instructed to meditate for a few minutes, and after that, any questions you have, you can get clarified by the Buddha. And what an opportunity that is. Sitting in front of the Master, seeing the Buddha. Now imagine in your mind's eye what you will be seeing. And you decide that the best meditation to do is the virtues of the Buddha right in front of you. And you reflect on how the Samma Sambuddha is your teacher, how the Buddha is your role model. And you reflect on what does this mean in practice for me? To have the Buddha as the role model. The main thing the Buddha taught was to be aware of your thoughts. And based on your thoughts, to be aware how your words and your actions form. How can I keep the Buddha as a role model in my mind when I am about to speak? How can I keep the Buddha as a role model in my mind when I am about to act? This is a reflection you can do 2-3 times a day as you wake up in the morning. You can make a determination that I will role model my thinking, my speech, my action as per the teacher. And around noon time, you can pause and reflect whether you were successful or whether there were any lapses. And if there were any lapses, how can you redetermine to be guided by the role model, to be guided by what the teacher would do, what the teacher would say, or rather how the teacher would say it, how the teacher would do it. And then in the evening, you can take another pause and reflect and check, were there any lapses? And if there was, what can I learn? And how can I redetermine again to role model the right speech and the right behavior. All right, friends. So that was a few minutes of a slightly different way of the Buddhanusati, slightly different to what we are traditionally used to. We usually chant the 9 special features of the Samma Sambuddha, and we reflect on what it means. Here, what we were guided by the Venerable when he conducted this meditation was to be aware and always to have the Buddha as the teacher and as a role model in the back of your mind, and to use that as a yardstick to ask yourself and to pause, especially when you are flustered and when you are getting into a negative state, is to pause and ask yourself, what would the teacher do? What would the teacher say? And I thought that was remarkable. It made a profound impact on me, and I thought I would like to share it, especially as the president requested me to do a 5-minute meditation. So, and this leads to today's topic as well. It is about the various difficulties we face when we are meditating. So the question is, what are we meditating on? And this leads back to the meditation, or rather the reflection we did just now about the Buddha as a teacher and as a role model had a certain way of thinking, and that thinking guided his speech and behavior. And the thinking is what we refer to as the right thinking. And what is this right thinking? It is all about understanding the characteristics of this world, of this universe. Everything that we know and that we don't know has 3 characteristics. It changes all the time, and that rapid change leads to nothing but sorrow and sadness. And there is nothing to control about it. It just happens. There's nothing to do, there's nothing to say, there's nothing to control. It's a program that is running, the selflessness. And this is what we refer to as impermanence, suffering, and selflessness. The Trilakkhana, which in the language of the Buddha at the time, the Magadha language, which we also refer to as Pali, was referred to as Anitya, Dukkha, and Anatta. So if we keep this as the right thinking, then life becomes easy to live. However, there are some slight misunderstandings about what impermanence is. We usually think of impermanence as something that happens over a period of time. When we look at our own photographs, especially if we take 10 years apart photos, it's very clear that we are changing. But that is not the impermanence that the Buddha was referring to. He was referring to something that is happening right now. The change is very fast and is happening at a particle level that is very small. Our senses can't comprehend it because it's too small. Our brain can't comprehend it because it is too fast. And therefore, due to a lack of scope in our senses, everything seems like permanent. So when I look in the mirror today, I see the same person that I thought I saw yesterday. It looks and feels the same. Whereas if you really look at it with the right equipment, we are made of very tiny particles, and those tiny particles are changing at a very rapid rate. So this is the right thinking. And when you understand this right thinking, of course, you are enlightened. And with that right thinking, then the words that get formed and the actions that get formed lead to only peace. The rest of us who don't have this in-depth, profound, experiential wisdom of this understanding, we believe that what we see is what we get. And we see that the person who is looking in the mirror today was the same person who was there yesterday. And that leads to us thinking that there's something there's some permanency in it. And that permanency then leads us to think that we are in control. And then when things don't happen the way we want to, of course, we are not happy. So I need to tell this in order to get into the things about the discomforts of meditation. Recently, I attended a funeral of a friend who lost his wife. My friend was a bit elderly. He's in his 80s and the wife is 76. So, of course, there's sadness and there's sorrow and there's grief when something like that happens, because we are very much attached to the people we love. And he and I were having a discussion. It's because we are not enlightened, we don't see that every day, every moment, there is birth, change, decay, and death every day. Because we don't see this, when that final death happens, for us it seems like a shock. In his case, he said, since his wife was not well for 10 years, it wasn't even a shock. He knew it's going to happen sooner than later. In fact, medically, she was given only 3 years since she was diagnosed, and she lived 10 years. So everybody knew she was going on borrowed time. However, because we are laymen, because we have not understood things the way the Buddha really understood, because we don't have the right thinking, as a result, we become very unhappy. And this is what we were discussing. We become very unhappy. It becomes unbearable. And what the Buddha was looking for as a young man was, he was simply looking for, how can I live life without sadness and without fear? And he found that you can live life without sadness and fear. And he lived life in that way for 45 years. He got enlightened at 35, and he lived an enlightened life for 45 years. So when somebody passes away, we say, Nivan suva labeva, or rather, may you get enlightened, and may the bliss of enlightenment be with you. Because we have no idea what we are saying, right? Because the whole bliss of enlightenment, we need it now for the rest of our lives. And that is what the Buddha and the other enlightened beings experienced back then. They experienced life. They had a lot of love, kindness, compassion, patience. And what they didn't have was grief, sadness, fear, anxiety, depression, worry. That is what they lost. So this is why we meditate. We meditate. The Satara Satipatthana is for us to understand that even though our senses, our eyes, our ears, nose, mouth, body, mind, even though the data that comes through our sense doors shows us that the person who is here today was also there yesterday, we need to intellectually understand that that is not the case. And the only way to understand that is through the Satara Satipatthana, or the Vipassana meditation. You need the Vipassana meditation to understand that reality, because that reality cannot be comprehended through the normal sense doors. There's a limitation in the normal sense dose. And that is why we meditate. So when we sit down to meditate for understanding this reality, because what we understand when we hear this Dhamma is a sort of a intellectual understanding. So we hear it first, and there is understanding that comes from hearing. And once we hear, we start thinking about it, reflecting on it. And then there is intellectual understanding that comes from reflecting on what you hear. And then you need to experience it. And the Buddha said, experiential wisdom is only possible through the Vidarshana or the Vipassana meditation. And when you experience it, then you know it for sure. And when you know it, and that is where the whole transition happens, the transformation of really realizing what is going on. And the Buddha said all the unenlightened people, they are plagued by an illness. It's like a madness. Because they don't understand the reality. It's almost like being a mad person. And as you start meditating, you do realize that, yes, 99% of the time I'm in that madness. There's a 1% of the time I'm in sanity. And then it's about wanting to get into more of that sanity than being in that state of madness. With this kind of a motivation, if you start meditating, then these are the various discomforts you come by, and this is how we can then overcome it. So in order to talk about overcoming these things, I felt it is also important to talk about why we are meditating in the first place. Now, generally, when anybody is meditating and depending on how well you are progressing, there are some common features that trouble people. These are the common ones. So the most common one is noise. And that is because we live in cities. At the time of the Buddha, he would give instructions to the monks to go to a quiet place. And usually, even at that time, the quiet places were near a cemetery or in the forest. And for us in the city, there is almost no quiet place. My first teacher was Venerable Homagama Kondanya Thero. He has given talks here as well. And he used to teach us at the Dehiwala YMBA Center. And that is located in the middle of the Dehiwala Junction area. So you can imagine what a noisy and busy place that is. And my teacher, the Venerable Thero, used to tell us that, sorry, this is the best place for meditation, because one of the main challenges a meditator faces is how to deal with the noise. And if you learn that, and if you can meditate here, you can meditate anywhere. And I was a 15-year-old school student at the time. And what I realized was, by practicing meditation in the Dehiwala Junction, I could study anywhere, no matter what noise. So during O-levels, A-levels, and later at university time, just because you are studying, it doesn't mean everybody else in the family is also studying, right? So somebody will be watching TV, somebody will have the radio on. We have dogs who will be always barking at the next door cat. And none of those bothered me, because meditation and study They're both the same, right? If you ask kids, they'll say, yes, they're both boring. You get distracted. After some time, you are like, why am I doing this? Isn't there something better to do? They have a lot of commonalities. And that's how I felt as a school kid. Anyway, so there are 4 things that contribute to challenging a meditator. So the noise is one. The discomfort in the body, pain in the body is the second one. The mind getting distracted is the third. Sleepiness and drowsiness is the fourth. So what I want to share is things that I learned and practiced through various tips and tools given by various teachers. And while there have been many teachers in my life, you always remember your first teacher with a lot of love and respect. And the things you learned from that teacher is also remembered because that's the first time you heard anything like that. So therefore, what Venerable Homagama Kondanya shared with me, I still remember. So let us take the first thing about noise. I read a book on Venerable Ajahn Chah. So Venerable Homagama Kondanya also happens to be Venerable Ajahn Chah's student. And Venerable Ajahn Chah writes, or rather in a book, it says that he was once meditating in the forest monastery when the village nearby, so his forest monastery is obviously in the forest, but there was a village nearby. And in the village nearby, there was a carnival. And therefore, there was music and dancing going throughout the night. So as the monk sat down to meditate, the music, the sounds, the shouting, the laughter disturbed him. And he noticed that he was getting agitated by it and irritated. And he started studying what is happening. And this is one of Venerable Ajahn Chah's most popular instruction. His instruction to meditation is sit, close your eyes and watch what's happening. Do nothing, just watch. So he was observing what's happening. He was wondering, why is this agitation arising? And what he found was what the Buddha also found. So imagine long ago, 2,600 years ago, when the Buddha, having tried all the techniques of all the teachers, realized that that has not taken away the fear and the sadness that he was trying to get rid of. He sat down and thought, let me figure this out myself. And when he was reflecting on how external data comes to us and how we respond to those external data. If you take noise, our ear can hear a sound. There's a sound wave that comes and gently vibrates the eardrum. And with those vibrations, there is a nerve that connects from the eardrum to the brain in a very simplistic way. And the data gets transferred to the brain. And the brain is a supercomputer. It starts analyzing on the sound. What is it analyzing against? Against memories, past memories. We have stored past memories where we have labeled many sounds historically. Some sounds we have labeled as these are sounds I like. Some sounds we have labeled as these are ones I dislike. And then there are ones that we don't care about, and those are the neutral sounds. So the ear is just made of flesh, nerves, blood vessels. And the Buddha realized that all the drama is not happening at the ear. Ear is just a door for the sound wave to enter. That's it. The ear does not recognize the sound. The ear has no idea whether the sound is good, bad. Do I like it? Do I not like it? The ear has no view about it. All that is happening in the brain, in the mind. And who put it into the brain or into the mind? Where did it come from? It came from the time we were born. So generally, now it is found that around the age of 15, 70% of our views are constructed by the age of 15. And imagine, we are not even mature, our brain even hasn't developed. Scientists have now found out that your logical brain fully develops for women at 25, for men at 28. So if we keep a bit of a safety factor also, let's say that by 30, men and women, by 30, you are a fully developed adult, at least from a brain point of view. So at age of 15, you have made 70% of your judgments of this world. You don't even have the legitimate right to do that because your brain hasn't developed the logical side of it. So then all of these are emotional decisions that we have made. So many things that we carry as this is what I like and this is what I don't like. This is my way of doing things. This has been always the way since childhood. All those things are probably based on a very irrational, childish experience. Anyway, so based on this, we respond. And then what Venerable Ajahn Chah found was his response to the music and the dancing. He realized that when he was a young man, he liked the music and the dancing. Now he doesn't like it because he's trying to meditate and he wants a quiet environment. He realized something very profound that day. He realized that the sound was not disturbing him, that he was disturbing the sound. Now, when I read it in a book, I was like, what? I'm not sure I understand it even now, but there's something really profound in it. The sound is not disturbing you. You are disturbing the sound. Because he was reflecting on himself as one part of his life. He loved music. He loved parties. He loved laughter. And now, in this stage of life, he doesn't like it. He has a dislike towards it. But it's the same, similar sound. So what is going on? It has nothing to do with the sound. It's all to do with you, the certain conclusions you are making, the perceptions you are having, the thinking you are having. So when he realized this, he realized the folly behind it, because behind this like and dislike, there's this misunderstanding of me. This is what I like. This is what I dislike. And he realized that this whole ego, me, myself, I, that is the problem. As long as you are going to get attached to things with liking, get attached to things with dislike, it's because of you identifying with yourself and believing that you can control things. So his dislike towards the music that was getting made in the village was because he believed that here I am meditating in this forest monastery and the villagers should know to be quiet. Then he realized how ridiculous that sounds. It's like you are the center of the universe and the universe should stand at attention and help your meditation. But that is how human beings are. And there are 7 billion of us in this planet who believe that way, that each of us are very special and everybody else better get their act together and make sure that things are right for me. This is the expectation. So when there is a noise, it is not the noise. The noise has nothing to do with it. It is the drama that we have generated in our mind because of our ego. So these cities, the place where you are, your house, it's the blessed place. It's the best place to meditate. Because you will have a lot of opportunities to practice this. It's always good to have some sound in the background, unplanned sound in the background, because there's some really profound meditation you can do. As you hear the sound, you can observe how dislike arises. This is really beautiful. You can see in Pali, the word for like and dislike was lobha and dvesha. Things I like, the Buddha explained back then as lobha. Things I dislike, he explained as dvesha. So you can see the lobha and dvesha rise depending on what the sound is. And when you consciously look at it, it goes away because the mind is such. There are two sides of the mind. There's a flowing side and there's a still side. It's in the flowing side that we get carried away by what we see and hear and feel, and we latch on to the perceptions. This is what I like, this is what I dislike. And based on that, our thoughts and words and actions start forming. That's the flowing nature of the mind. There's a still part of the mind where you can consciously observe. The mind observing the mind. When you are aware that desire has arisen, aversion has arisen, when you are conscious, the flow stops. It's a simple rule. You think of a human being as a device, like your smartphone. It has a design. There are design principles. So one design principle is, if you observe your flowing mind with your still mind, the flow stops momentarily. That's a design principle. So when you realize that some noise has come, you don't like that noise, when you realize this and when you observe that dislike, the dislike stops. When you observe that there's a noise and the noise is beautiful, it's something you like, and you observe the noise, then the liking stops, because both cannot exist together. It's one or the other. So that is how you deal with the noise. The Buddha instructed, what you see is only what you see, what you hear is only what you hear, and what he was meaning, there are many ways you can interpret it. One way to interpret it is, your eyes can see only colors, light, and shapes. Your ear can hear only a sound. The interpretation is in the brain, the supercomputer. So if you stay at your eye level or at your ear level, then there is no problem. It's just data. So that is how we deal with the noise, friends. How do you deal with the pain and the discomfort? So yesterday, I was at the 7-day panel of my friend's place. The banner was for the wife who departed 7 days ago. So I like to sit in the middle without anything to lean back and sit cross-legged and sit still, because we are always so busy, we are rushing about. When you're rushing about, your mind, your thoughts are also like an express train. But when you still your body, it gives an opportunity for your mind to still. It's like, imagine you take a pot half full of water and you shake the pot very hard and the water is all shaking. And then you keep the pot on the floor, and it takes a bit of time for the water to settle down and be still. So when listening to Bana physically at a location, I like to sit cross-legged and sit still, not change my posture for 1 hour, because I know then my mind slowly settles down and listens. Now, just 10-15 minutes into it, the side of my leg fell asleep, and very soon it started to pain. And I then remembered my teacher, Venerable Homa Gamakondan, Thero. He used to tell us, when you are sitting down for an hour or half an hour, whatever, if there is a pain, it's an excellent opportunity to practice something very, very useful. And that is this whole idea that pain is in the body, the suffering is in the mind. What does that mean? He was saying if you can break pain into two sections, there's a physical pain in the body, and there's also an emotional dislike to that physical pain. And he asked us back then, what do you think? Which one do you think is greater? What do you think, friends? So you guessed right. It's almost like 90 and 10 or 80 and 20. The physical pain, imagine, is just 20%. It's the emotional dislike that is 80%. Sometimes the physical pain is 10%, the dislike is 90%. And sitting there on the floor, listening to the banner, with my leg paining, I realized that this was a 90-10 situation. The pain, or rather the suffering that I was going through, I realized there is only 10% in the leg. The rest of it was in my mind, like, oh no, why is my pain? Why is my leg paining? Come on, I can sit for 1 hour. It's just 10 minutes, and 10 minutes into the sitting, why is my leg paining? This is so inconvenient. Why is this happening to me? We are all drama kings and queens. And when I realized that, then I thought, here's an opportunity to practice. And of course, this means I'm distracted now from the banner. But I thought this is such an amazing opportunity to practice because I'm seated and I'm going to be seated. I had determined that I'm going to be seated in this posture for 1 hour, and I was definitely going to do that. And I thought, what a lovely opportunity. Let me observe this pain. And when you start observing this pain, you start understanding the intrinsic nature of that pain. First and foremost, you realize that even though it seems like this huge pain, it's actually, you can break it up. It's actually, sometimes it's intense, sometimes it's not. You can almost feel like it's rising and falling, it's rising and falling. There's no pattern, but it's certainly not a straight line. There's a rise and a fall. And that was interesting. Also the location. At a glance, it looked like the entire leg is paining. But when you start focusing, investigating, you can see that you can pinpoint the places where it is hurting. And you can see that those locations keep changing. And that is impermanence, friends. Nothing is forever. The location changes. The intensity changes. The type of pain changes. And the banner became interesting. And momentarily, I went back to the banner and I forgot about the pain. And when I remembered the pain again, when I checked, it wasn't there. What usually happens is when a discomfort comes, we adjust our body. We don't use it as an opportunity to observe the pain, to study the pain, to learn about the nature of pain. There are 3 characteristics to everything in this universe. The same applies to pain. But we need to observe it. Now, initially, long ago when I was practicing initially, I had a fear of the pain as well. I would think, oh my God, something bad will happen if I don't do something, because I'm sitting cross-legged and my one leg is falling asleep. Will I get paralyzed? Will something bad happen? Is a blood vessel getting squeezed and blood is not going? Is the leg going to die? So that's the drama side of it. But then when you study about this, why does this happen? What happens when you are sitting in a posture? What happens? And then when you realize that nothing bad or serious is going to happen, it's actually a bit of a discomfort. And the more you sit, the more you understand. And then that fear element goes away completely. Then you have to only deal with the pain in the body and the dislike towards that pain in the mind. And over time, I realized that what my teacher said was absolutely true. The pain is in the body and the suffering is in the mind. That realization doesn't make it go away. It just helps you to realize what's going on. Once you realize what's going on, it's not as bad as it was when you started. And this is why meditation masters usually advise, start with 5 minutes a day, gradually get into at least 20 minutes a day. Because it takes at least 20 minutes of sitting to be able to investigate these kind of things. What happens when there's a pain? What happens when there's a noise? And gradually, he said, progress at least up to 1 hour. Because when you sit for 1 hour, you learn so much about your body and about yourself. And that is what this is all about, understanding what's really going on. Another thing about pain is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Now, most often we feel that pain is a bad thing. But actually it is not, because pain actually can save our lives. So if you take something like appendicitis, for example, the pain is a warning that something is wrong. And when something hurts, we generally go to a doctor. And then the doctor tells us what we need to do. The doctor guides us thereafter. And there are so many instances that a pain that popped up randomly and started being almost a continuous thing on investigation helped to prevent something really drastic from happening. So pain is a good thing. Because if you think that pain is a bad thing, then that adds to that suffering in the mind. But if you think of pain as a good thing, it saves your life. It tells you that something is wrong. It tells you that you are tired and you need to take a break. Then when there's a pain in the body while you are meditating, you know that the body is doing what the body does, and I need to do what I need to do. So that, friends, is how you deal with the pain. Now, these are things for you to try and test out, and I'm pretty sure some of you you know this already, you are doing this already. And I'm sure there are other methods as well. I'm sharing some things that has helped me. The third one is about the mind getting distracted. Now, I have had friends who they sit and within minutes, they are in some dhyana level. And I look at them and I'm like, wow, how do they do that? I went to a Sinhala medium Dhamma school long ago. There were no English medium Dhamma schools. And from grade 1, I was taught meditation, anapanasati, meditation. And for a long time in my life, I thought there are only very few meditations in this world, anapanasati, metta meditation, and so on. I wasn't introduced to anything else and I didn't know. But as I got curious and started investigating, looking, reading, listening, I found that there is There are many, many techniques. And I found that there are some techniques that actually suits people who get easily distracted. And you had to do this by trial and error. So I was doing various techniques by trial and error, and I found that there are two meditations, Vedana-anupassana and Chitta-anupassana, which I find suits a person who gets distracted easily. So when I sit and try to do Anapanasati meditation, I get distracted all the time. And if I meditate for an hour, most of that hour I'm remembering to come back to the point of meditation again. But I had the good fortune of going for a meditation retreat at Hindagala, conducted by Mr. Goenka. We call him Goenka Ji, and his staff. And there was a 10-day retreat, and they introduced this Vedana-anupassana technique where it's a body scan. You start from the top of your head and you scan your body. You go by area of the size of like a rupee coin. You can think of that size. So it's a systematic way of exploring the head, the face, and you come down slowly through the body to the feet. So for my distracted mind, there was something to do. And I found that it's easy to do that because that worked better than trying to focus my mind on one thing. And similarly, observing thoughts, observing how like and dislike arises, I find very useful. So these are two practices that I do in my daily life, because if you look at the Satara Satipatthana, the Buddha advised that it is something that, certainly something you can practice while sitting down in a meditation posture with your eyes closed. But it is also something you can practice while you are going about your daily activities. And whenever I remember, I do that. I try to practice a bit of this in my daily life as I'm going about my daily work and chores and so on. So how do you practice this? Vedana-anupassana, or reflecting on feelings. A shortcut method to this is, well, this was the proper way to learn this technique, at least the way I learned it, of a 10-day retreat. The first 3 days, you calm your mind down. So the first 3 days was purely practicing Anapanasati meditation. And the balance 7 days was when Vedana-anupassana was introduced, and you practice that for the balance 7 days. And the shortcut way is to focus on the sole of your feet or your palms, and you'll feel a tingling feeling, a numbness, a bit of like something is happening there, some little movement, some sensations are there. So sensations, this is the study of sensations. There are many sensations on our body, it's just that we are not conscious about them. We have never focused about them. And therefore, initially, people find it difficult to feel these sensations. But as you start focusing, as you start observing, you get into the hang of it. And then these sensations are a feeling of numbness, a tingling feeling, feeling like some little ant is running on you, a stretching feeling, feeling like the skin is being pulled or pushed, or like some weight is being kept or some weight is being lifted, a lightness, feeling of some heat, feeling of some cold, feeling a bit of wetness, feeling dryness, feeling itchy or scratchy, various kinds of sensations. So as you start observing these sensations, and when you start observing, doing this body scan in a systematic way from the top of your head, coming down to the tip of your toes, that really works for a distracted mind. So if your mind is getting distracted, maybe, and if it is often getting distracted, maybe you need to try a technique that helps you to stay with. That is what I could say in terms of that for the mind getting distracted. Sleepiness, drowsiness. There are a couple of things that has helped me on this. So there was a time when if I sit for meditation, I am definitely going to fall asleep. I used to feel very sleepy and very drowsy. And I was advised when that happens, do a bit of walking meditation. And yes, certainly that helps. When you're walking, blood circulation happens well, and your limbs get a bit of movement, and that gives you a bit of energy. And then when you feel you are ready to sit again, you can sit. So walking meditation certainly helps. When I'm really tired, I have noticed that you have to really fight hard to stay awake. And maybe you really need some sleep. Venerable Ajahn Brahmansha, in one of his talks, he said how a lady who was a busy person working in the private sector would come to his 10-day retreat, and the first 3 days, she would actually fall asleep and she would snore. And other fellow meditators would complain that her snoring was bothering them. And of course, it was a good opportunity to practice how you want to overcome disturbance of a sound. And Ajahn Ram would let the lady to sleep because he said she really needed sleep. She has been so sleep deprived. She really needs that sleep. So he would let her sleep. And then from the 4th day onwards, she will get some fantastic meditation done because she's rested. So when you feel sleepy, you might need to ask yourself, are you really tired? Are you really sleepy? Are you sleep deprived? Or is this what the Buddha referred to as lethargy? Lethargic feelings, lethargic thoughts, just being plain lazy, right? And if it is things like that, then of course, there is an entire sermon on this where the Buddha advised Venerable Moggallana on many things to do to overcome sleepiness and the drowsiness. And if you are a person who gets bothered a lot with this, I recommend that you look for that and read it or listen to a sermon on it. And there are many things, a couple of things which I just remember offhand. It's not systematic, it's just what I remember offhand. So yellow, the color yellow, we associate with sunlight. We associate it with the morning. So when you're feeling drowsy and all, to visualize yellow as a circle, or the color yellow, because it sends a signal to the brain that it is daytime, it's noon, and the brain knows that if it is the daytime, it's not the time to sleep, and so on. So few things like that. There was also an instruction to gently squeeze your earlobe. So there were some very useful tools. I remember at the time when I did feel sleepy, habitually I was feeling sleepy. I listened to one of those sermons and I practiced some of those things, and it really helped. But nowadays I find that is not there that much, the sleepiness and the drowsiness. What really helps me in wanting to meditate and overcome any sleepiness or drowsiness is reflecting on death, the Marananusmati meditation. If you just think about how fortunate we are to be born at the time that the Buddha's valuable Dhamma is still available in the world. So fortunate we are that our ears are still functioning, that we can hear this wonderful Dhamma. So fortunate we are that there are radio channels, TV channels with 24 hours of Dhamma talks. Then any of your favorite monks or lay people you like to listen to, those talks are available on YouTube. So we are definitely fortunate. There's an abundance of Dhamma in the world. And right now, when I reflect at the time I was growing up, the kind of talks, Dhamma talks that were there and the Dhamma talks that are there now, there's a huge difference. It's almost like awakening, a reawakening of the original Dhamma that the Buddha taught. And it's amazing. We are so fortunate. But imagine that you, we happen to drop dead tonight. How unfortunate is that? We had the opportunity to learn the Dhamma, to hear the Dhamma, and to practice the Dhamma, but we missed this birth as well. And the more I reflect on this, I'm thinking, all of us probably were there at the time of the Buddha. All of us probably went to Jetavanaram. All of us probably sat and listened. And all of us thought, oh, this is wonderful. This is lovely. I must do this, but I first need to cook. I need to check on my children's homework. I need to finish my PowerPoint presentation. And this weekend, I have my cousin's birthday to go to. On Sunday, I have to do my shopping. And I had to have a bath and have a nap, right? And I'm sure this happened every birth. And here we are, friends, in this birth as well, doing exactly that. So I think you need to reflect on death, because if we are to die tonight, what a waste. Imagine at the time of the Buddha, people, the way people got enlightened, it doesn't seem like you needed a lot of intellectual ability, isn't it? It seemed like really normal people who happened to just accidentally go past the temple and just dropped in to see somebody and happened to hear a sermon. And then they got interested, and then they practiced and they got enlightened, right? Doesn't seem like rocket science, isn't it? The Buddha never said it was. The Buddha said, if you're born a human, that's it. That's all that's required. He never said that you need to, have a PhD, you need to learn Abhidhamma, you need to have listened to so many hours of talks. He didn't say any of those things. He said, if you understand how fortunate you are, and if you understand how you have no idea how long your life is and how risky it is, once you die, you have no idea what the next thing is going to be. You would look for this like a person whose head is on fire. If your head was on fire, what would you do? Would you say, let me first check on my child's homework? Would you say, I have to take my daughter for swimming today? Or would you say that, I have a wedding to attend to? Or I will do this next week after work, if I have time? Because this is what we all say, isn't it? If your head is on fire, you will just run to the nearest bucket of water and douse yourself with the water because your head is on fire. He said, if you really understand what is going on, and if you really understand how fortunate you are, and if you really understand the risk in front of all of us, that is how you will seek this. And I think of myself, I don't see that urgency in myself. And then there is a friend, dear friends, there is a risk that we are going to do this again and again and again. And we'll soon run out of Buddha time. And that is why, for this sleepiness, we need to remind ourselves, imagine this was the last meditation of my life. Then maybe you'll wake up a bit. So these are the things I wanted to share. And I'd like to pause now and see if you have any questions, or if you would like to share some of your own experiences of how you overcome the challenges of noise, a pain, a discomfort, the mind getting distracted, and the sleepiness. I'll share one example of how this meditation practice helped me. So recently, just about a week ago, my mother got ill and we had to admit her to hospital. And she stayed a couple of days in hospital. At the time she was admitted, it looked like it could be either a stroke or a heart attack. There were 7 possibilities. And later all the investigation showed that it was none of them. It was something entirely different and it was not life-threatening. But the symptoms were of a heart attack and a stroke combined. So now she's out and now she's getting medication for whatever that was. Anyway, I want to relate to a day when we didn't know that she was out of danger, and I had kind friends. I had my kind helper who all said they will stay the night with my mother and for me to go to work. But I thought, I'm the only daughter. What's the point of a daughter if the daughter can't stay a night with the mother at the hospital? So I said, no, I want to stay with mom. So please, thank you very much, but I will stay. And the way she was, I felt that I was going to lose her. And therefore I was feeling very sad. I was feeling grief. I was feeling very unsettled. And then I was wondering, why is this? I am 51, my mother is 80. From the age of 10, I had this fear, and I later found out that many children have this fear. I had this fear that my mother is going to die. I was 10 at the time. And once I just woke up seeing a dream that my mother is dead. So I physically went to verify, and she was sleeping, and she, of course, woke up and asked me what the problem was. I said, I saw a dream. In my dream, you were dead. And she was like, I can assure you that I'm quite alive. Can you please go back and sleep? And since then, I realized that there was a fear in me that I'm going to lose my mother. And that fear was there always. It was always like, it was in the back. It was never in the front, but it was always there. And then I was thinking, now I'm 51 and my mother is 80, and I still have this fear that my mother is going to die. So there were 2 things I realized. As laymen, we are never ready to let go of the people we love. And I realized that I had, from the age of 10 up to 51, I had spent 41 years in fear. And I was thinking, what did the Buddha advise us? And then I remembered, okay, the Buddha said that everything is changing right now. And I thought, okay, let me focus on this. And while I was standing near my mother, stroking her hair. I was focusing on Vedananupasana. And those sensations which are coming because of these changes that's happening in the body, those sensations reminded me that right now, Uppadavayadam, things are getting born, decaying, and fading away right now, in this moment. In this moment, there's nothing for me to identify as myself, because even if I pinpoint one of those tiny particles that I can't see with my eye, even if I point to that particle and say, this particle is me, they change at such a rapid speed, a speed that is faster than the brain can comprehend. By the time I point at a particle, that particle is gone, and some other particle is also gone, and some very, very different particle is there, and that will also be gone. So there is no particle that I can point to and say that this is me. And this is why the Buddha said that you don't exist, but you think you do. Because you think you exist, you get attached to other things that you think that exist, like your mother, like your father, like your husband and your children, your car and your house. And then when you reflect like this, you realize that you have created your own suffering because of your wrong thinking. So momentarily you feel some peace, just momentarily. And I thought, what an amazing opportunity. Here I am in a hospital, what an amazing opportunity to do this reflection. And the hospital I was in, this was the Kalubowila Hospital, a fantastic place. It's a teaching hospital. The doctors, the nurses, they were amazing. Throughout the night, they were on their feet. The hospital was overcrowded. Many beds had 2 patients. And the doctors and the nurses were doing everything they could to help the patients. Seeing them that night, friends, restored my faith in human beings. I was thinking how hard they work throughout the night. You can't sleep in that hospital because it's all busy. And anyway, you barely have a place to sit. And I was thinking, I'm so fortunate. How many children can say that they had the opportunity to look after their mother for one night? And I thought, I'm so fortunate to get that opportunity to be with my mother for a night and to look after her, to care for her, and to observe how fortunate we are for having these facilities, these medical services. And that is how I spend the night, and spending the night in reflecting on Anitya, Dukkha and Anatta. It made me peaceful. It made me loving and kind and compassionate. And next day, instead of putting leave and sleeping it off, I went to work because I was tired and I was sleepy, but I was happy and peaceful. And that is the power of the truth. When you are in sync with the truth in the world, that truth is very powerful. It's peaceful, it's liberating, even for a moment. So let me pause there and check whether you have any questions. I can see some comments in the chat. So there were, okay, some nice, sweet thank yous. So no questions there, but appreciations. So thank you very much for everyone for the appreciations. Any questions from the live audience? Anyone? All right. In that case, let us then, okay, Samantha. Samantha, yes, please. Go ahead, Samantha. Would you like to unmute?
Yeah, thank you, Nadeesha. That was really practical, and I really benefited from that session because even my life at the moment is under so much stress, and I find the Dhamma and practicing the Dhamma really helps me, gives me strength. And your talk was very inspirational. So my question is now, so in stressful situations when you're constantly bombarded and sometimes you're tired as well, lack of sleep and everything because you had to attend to other people, and then after several attempts one tends to react, can't control the situation, say, because obviously you're fatigued, your mindfulness is not as strong, even though you're aware, but you still can't control it. So then how does one uh, do things calmly and react when underneath you're going, and not really peacefully like a Buddha would be. Well, obviously he's purified his mind and he doesn't have any greed, hatred, delusions at all. But until we get to that stage, yeah, that's what I was just wondering.
Thank you for that, Samantha. Thank you for asking that question. I would think that the Buddha would advise us to focus on self-care first. And during the time that my mother was not well, I in fact told my boss that I need a day off. And I said, in that day off, I'm going to sleep because number one, it's very stressful. Number two, this was as my mother got admitted. I said, I feel very emotionally down. I feel I'm not ready to say goodbye. I'm not ready to let go of my mother. And I was feeling very emotionally down. And then the stress and not slept. And I felt that there is no use from me in this state for myself or for others. And I felt the best service I can do for myself and for others is to take a few hours and sleep. And that is what I did, because you find that if you are not there to do something, then either it doesn't get done or somebody else will do it. But I felt that I need to sleep. Okay. So I prioritized self-care and I slept a couple of hours. And after that, I realized that I was feeling physically strong, mentally strong, and I could be of great service to everybody and to myself as well. Right. You just have to do it, Samantha. You're not a machine. Okay.
Thank you.
So I prioritize self-care a lot, even when the kids were small. So now my children are young adults. Even when they were small, I would tell them that this is mommy time. Mommy is going to have a nap. Because if mommy doesn't have a nap, mommy is going to be in a bad mood. And trust me, you won't like me in a bad mood. I would tell this to my children, and they were just babies. But I felt that unless I get some rest, giving myself that rest made me strong physically and emotionally, and then I could be at my best for others.
Lovely. Thank you. And also it distracts away from that stressful situation, and then you're able to sort of like think at the situation, approach it in a fresh way, better way, wholesome way.
Absolutely. I have found that sometimes, just like Venerable Homagama Konnanya said, the pain is in the body, the suffering is in the mind. My goodness, we suffer so much because of the emotions. And sometimes if you just lie down and close your eyes and just drift into a sleep, once you wake up, you have a cup of tea, and actually most of the problem is gone.
Gone. Yeah. Lovely. Thank you. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu. Thank you. Anyone else? So I have a practice session every Sunday at 8:30 in the morning in English medium through Zoom. Please feel free to join if you like to. We practice the Vipassana techniques. Most of us, we practice only on Sunday, but at least once a week is better than not having a practice at all. And even once a week, it adds up. And over a period of time, you feel it has an impact. So my advice is, please start a daily practice. If not a daily practice, at least a weekend practice. So looks like there's no more questions. So we can close the session. Then let us transfer merit. So may the merit of listening to this sermon and practicing a bit of meditation, may all those merit be passed to everyone who is in need of this merit. For those of you, the relatives who have passed away of yours, friends and relatives, if they are in need of this merit, may they get this merit. For the devas and any other beings who would love to have this merit, may this merit go to them. May this merit pass on to all of us. May all of you be healthy and be well and get enlightened in this birth itself and enjoy the bliss of enlightenment for the rest of your life, because you all deserve it. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. I will then close the recording and end the session.